Imagine you're online right now, maybe clicking links, checking emails, transferring some files. You're doing this stuff every single day, probably without even giving it a second thought, right?
Hmm.
But have you ever stopped to consider what's actually happening, behind the scenes, way up at the very top of the network stack?
Right.
What's really protecting those interactions? And, maybe more importantly, where do things go wrong most often?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving deep into something really foundational, yet I think often vastly underestimated. It's the OSI Layer 7, the application layer.
Right.
And this isn't just some dry technical term. It's really the interface where our digital lives unfold. It's the point where you, the user, meet the digital world. And here's the kicker. It's also where the overwhelming majority of cyber attacks are aimed.
Exactly. And what's truly insightful about Layer 7 isn't just that it's where user interactions happen. It's where your digital persona is most exposed.
Exposed, okay.
Yeah. Unlike the lower layers, which mostly manage the, let's say, the silent plumbing and wiring, the basic transmission of raw data. Layer 7 is where attackers specifically prey on human behavior. And they exploit the logic within the applications themselves.
Ah, so it's not just about the tech, it's about how we use it.
Precisely. It makes it a fascinating battleground. Psychology, application logic, as much as it is a test of pure technology.
Our mission today, then, is to give you a genuine shortcut to being well-informed about this critical layer. We'll cut through the noise, break down its core functions, explore the most prevalent and sometimes ingenious exploits. We'll look at how to mount a robust defense against them, and we'll examine some high-profile, real-world examples that really drive these lessons home.
Yeah, those case studies are revealing.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer, maybe even more cautious picture of the digital landscape you navigate daily. And you'll understand why this layer, the application layer, is so incredibly crucial to your online safety. So let's start by painting a picture. When we talk about the application layer, we're talking about Layer 7. It's the pinnacle, right?
Yeah.
Of the Open Systems Interconnection, or OSI model. That's the conceptual framework. 7 distinct categories for network communication.
Exactly. Think of the OSI model as, well, the definitive blueprint. It's a standardized vocabulary for network functions. Layer 7 is the highest level.
Right at the top.
Right. It acts as the direct interface for your application software and, by extension, for you, the end user. It provides the essential services directly to the software running on your device.
Like my browser or my email client.
Well, it enables those things we take for granted, like email, file transfers, web browsing. It's not the user interface itself, not Chrome or Outlook directly, but rather the foundational layer. It provides the underlying protocols and services that those applications use to actually present and exchange data with the internet.
Okay.
So, for instance, when you just access a website, there's this intricate dance of HTTP requests and responses happening behind the scenes. Those are all fundamentally Layer 7 events.
So it's not the destination itself, but the vital pathway the application uses to get to the network.
Exact.
And you mentioned a data journey. Once data starts at Layer 7, how does it actually travel? What's the conceptual flow down the stack?
That's right. It's the first step in a pretty complex journey. Layer 7 is the bridge. It prepares your application's data for its trip down through the rest of the network stack.
Okay.
And this layered approach is key. It gives us modularity, efficiency. From the application layer, Layer 7, the data gets handed off to Layer 6, the presentation layer.
Layer 6 presentation, what does that do?
Layer 6 makes sure the data is in a format that both the sending and receiving systems can actually understand. It handles things like data translation, compression, and, crucially, encryption.
Ah, encryption happens there.
Muffin.
Yes.
Then it moves down to Layer 5, the session layer. That layer is responsible for establishing, managing, and then gracefully terminating the communication dialogue, the session, between the two applications.
Got it. Session management.
Yeah. And each of these layers communicates only with its immediate neighbors, up or down. This ensures a highly structured, standardized process. It's what makes network communication remarkably robust and, importantly, scalable.
Now, this OSI model, you said it's powerful conceptually, right, for understanding how networks should work. But it's not quite how modern networks actually operate day to day.
Right.
We usually hear about TCP/IP instead. So what's the core difference between these two? And more importantly, why should you listening care about this distinction when we're talking about security? Does it actually change our approach?
That's a really critical question, and it absolutely shapes how we talk about security. While OSI is, as you said, a descriptive seven-layer conceptual framework, TCP/IP is the pragmatic four-layer model. It directly reflects the protocols and technologies we actually use in the real world today.
4 layers versus 7. Okay.
Yeah. The key difference is that the TCP/IP model effectively combines the functionalities of OSI's session, presentation, and application layers, layers 5, 6, and 7, into a single unified application layer.
Ah, okay. So it bundles them up.
It bundles them, and this isn't just some academic detail. It profoundly impacts how security professionals classify, discuss, and crucially, defend against threats. Because, well, the attack surface looks less granular in that real-world model, but the functions are still there.
So the way we conceptualize these layers truly influences how we protect them. Can you elaborate a bit more on why that OSI distinction still really matters for crafting effective defense strategies?
Absolutely. The granular separation in the OSI model, even though it's conceptual, it provides an invaluable standardized vocabulary. It helps us isolate vulnerabilities and deploy specialized security tools more precisely.
Okay.
Consider a traditional network firewall. These devices, which most organizations rely on, typically operate down at OSI layers 3 and 4, the network and transport layers.
Right. IP addresses, ports.
Exactly. They're excellent at blocking traffic based on IP addresses and port numbers. So they're highly effective against things like, say, volumetric attacks like SYN floods.
Yeah.
However, if we're dealing with an attack that's specific to layer 7, like an HTTP flood, which uses seemingly legitimate web requests.
Ah, okay. It looks like normal traffic.
Exactly. To a traditional network firewall that often looks like normal, benign traffic, it just sails right through, undetected, but it can silently overwhelm the application layer itself.
Ah, so that's the wolf in sheep's clothing scenario for a traditional firewall. Looks okay, but it's actually malicious.
Precisely. And this is where the OSI distinction becomes critical for defense. This is where something like a web application firewall or a WAF comes into the picture.
Zubaya.
WAFs are specifically engineered to analyze traffic at layer 7. They meticulously inspect the actual content of HTTP and HTTPS requests. They're looking for malicious patterns like SQL injection attempts or cross-site scripting payloads, or even those subtle indications of a slow-Loris DDoS attack.
So it understands the application's language.
Exactly. A WAF is distinct from even a next-generation firewall, an NGFW. While NGFWs offer some Layer 7 visibility, they primarily focus on broader traffic inspection. This really highlights why different threats need different tools.
Right.
A truly comprehensive defense strategy needs both. You need network-level firewalls and application-level firewalls, each addressing distinct attack vectors at their appropriate points in the stack.
Makes sense.
So the seven-layer OSI framework, it serves as this vital tool. It enables a shared understanding of where different technologies fit and how they must work together to create a robust, multi-layered defense.
That helps immensely in understanding the landscape of security tools. So to really cement that, if we put it side by side for our listener, how did these layers map up conceptually, especially at the application layer where we're focused today?
Yeah, to help visualize this, think of it like this. OSI's Layer 7 applications, 6 presentation, and 5 session, they all conceptually fall under the TCP/IP model's single, broader application layer.
Okay, 7, 6, 5 become 1 in TCP/IP.
Pretty much, functionally. But this conceptual clarity in OSI helps us articulate where and how to deploy specialized defenses, like a WAF, for those application-specific threats. Below that, OSI's Layer 4 transport maps directly to TCP/IP's transport layer.
Okay.
OSI's Layer 3 network aligns with TCP/IP's internet layer. And then OSI's Layer 2, data link, and Layer 1, physical, are generally grouped together as TCP/IP's network access layer.
Got it.
It's really about providing distinct boundaries for different functions, which proves incredibly valuable for security pros to speak a common language when they're dissecting attack surfaces and vulnerabilities.
All right, that mental map of the layers is invaluable. So if that's the conceptual playground, what are the actual games, the everyday protocols we're playing on it? How do they work at layer 7? Most of us are on the web constantly. What's the protocol making all that happen?
That would be the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP. It's the absolute foundational application layer protocol for the entire World Wide Web.
HTTP.
It's meticulously designed for efficiently transmitting hypermedia documents like HTML pages. It operates on a classic client-server model. Your web browser, the client, initiates connection to a server to make a request, and then the server sends back a response.
Request response. Simple enough.
Simple, but a key characteristic, and often a challenging one, is its fundamental statelessness.
Stateless, what does that mean?
It means the server doesn't retain any session data between requests. It treats each new request as if it were completely independent of any prior interactions.
Ah, okay, so it forgets you immediately.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
This design is elegantly simple, incredibly scalable, but it meant that mechanisms like cookies had to be introduced later on just to maintain a continuous user experience.
Right, like keeping items in a shopping cart or staying logged in.
Exactly. Those things rely on cookies to overcome HTTP's statelessness.
Oh.
Most of us are familiar with GT requests to retrieve data or POST requests to send data, like submitting a form. But the security takeaway here is how attackers can sometimes weaponize seemingly innocuous GET requests to trigger unintended actions, bypassing assumptions about them being read only. Or how an overly verbose 404 not found error message can inadvertently leak crucial server information to a potential attacker.
But HTTP wasn't always safe. I definitely remember a time when you really had to look for that little padlock icon in the browser to feel secure. What changed?
Yeah, you're right. In its original form, HTTP was highly insecure. It transmitted all data in clear text.
Just plain text. Anyone could read it.
Anyone who could intercept the network traffic could read your information directly, completely unencrypted. This left it incredibly vulnerable to interception and modification, a severe risk for sensitive data like login credentials or credit card numbers. So here's where it gets interesting. HTTPS, or HTTP Secure, addressed this critical weakness. It essentially wraps HTTP in a secure tunnel powered by TLS transport layer security.
PLS, I've heard of that. Is that like SSL?
Think of TLS as the modern, more robust evolution of the older SSL. This layering establishes an encrypted channel for communication, ensuring the confidentiality and integrity of your data while it's in transit.
Okay, so confidentiality and integrity.
Right. So while the application running on top still speaks HTTP, TLS ensures those conversations are encrypted and tamper-proof. It's essentially putting your data in an armored car for its journey across the internet.
That makes sense. Okay, beyond just web browsing, file transfer is another core digital activity we rely on daily. FTP is a name many of us recognize, maybe from the early days of the internet. What's the story with FTP today? Are its risks still relevant?
File Transfer Protocol, FTP. It's a true classic in the world of application layer protocols, designed purely for transferring files between machines.
Right.
It's text-based and stateful, meaning it requires client authentication before any file transfer can happen. But while historically effective for bulk data transfers, its profound security weaknesses are still incredibly relevant today. The protocol was simply not designed with security in mind. It completely lacks a secure, encrypted tunnel for data transmission. Passwords, sensitive data, even the files themselves are transmitted in plain text.
Until plain text.
Still, making them incredibly susceptible to interception by any threat actor who simply sniffs the network traffic.
But surely we don't still use something that fundamentally insecure today. And that sounds like a massive open door for attackers.
That's a critical point, and it leads directly to a persistent, often overlooked vulnerability in many organizations. Despite being, let's say, largely outdated and fundamentally incompatible with modern security standards, FTP is surprisingly still used in countless corporate environments.
Totally. Why?
Legacy systems, sometimes convenience. Even more concerningly, it's frequently used for updating firmware in embedded systems and a vast array of IoT devices.
Oh, wow.
This persistence of legacy protocols creates a significant, frequently ignored attack surface. An organization can invest heavily in state-of-the-art defenses, like WFs, implement secure coding practices for their web apps. But a single, old, unmonitored FTP server can become the weakest link. This unencrypted system can easily be exploited to gain an initial foothold in the internal network. It gives an attacker a clear path to pivot toward more sensitive assets. It's a stark reminder. Your defense strategy is only as strong as its weakest link. A single insecure legacy protocol can render all other Layer 7 security investments moot.
That's a sobering thought, how a forgotten legacy system can undermine everything. Thankfully, you mentioned there are much better, more secure alternatives, right?
Absolutely. We have significantly better alternatives today. There's FTPS or FTP Secure. It builds upon FTP by incorporating SSL/TLS encryption, much like HTTPS, to secure the transmission.
Okay, FTPS.
But the superior and widely recommended option is SFTP, Secure File Transfer Protocol.
SFTP. Different from FTPS.
Yes, SFTP is different. It leverages an SSH or secure shell connection to send and receive files over a robust encrypted channel. And it supports all of SSH's strong authentication methods, providing a truly secure and reliable alternative to the plaintext vulnerabilities of classic FTP.
Got it. SFTP over SSH is the way to go for secure file transfer.
Definitely.
Email is another daily staple, an absolute cornerstone of digital communication for most people. What application layer protocols are at play there, sending and receiving our messages?
Email communication at Layer 7 is governed by a suite of protocols, each with a specific job. SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, is the primary workhorse for sending and relaying email messages between mail servers.
Okay, server to server.
Right, so when you hit send, your email client or server acts as the SMTP client. It initiates a connection to your mail server to transmit the message. That server then processes the email, figures out the recipient server based on their address, and then uses SMTP again to relay the message onward.
So SMTP ensures it gets to the right server. How do we, as users, then retrieve it and get it into our inboxes?
Right. Once the message arrives at the recipient's mail server, a different set of protocols takes over for retrieval. POP3, or Post Office Protocol 3, is a more, let's say, primitive protocol.
POP3, I remember that.
Yeah. By default, it downloads emails from the server and often deletes them, essentially treating your inbox like a physical mailbox you empty.
Okay, download and delete.
In contrast, IMAP, the Internet Message Access Protocol, is more modern and widely used today. It saves and synchronizes email on the server.
Ah, keeps it on the server.
Exactly. This allows you to manage your mail from multiple devices, your phone, laptop, web client, all seeing the same synchronized view of your inbox. Much more flexible for today's multi-device world.
Definitely. And were these email protocols, POP3 and IMAP, initially as insecure as HTTP or FTP, sending everything in the clear?
Yes. Typically, they used clear text transmission in their original forms, much like HTTP and FTP.
Okay.
The good news is that, similar to those other protocols, secure variants like SMTPS, which is just SMTP over TLS, now use TLS to establish encrypted connections. This ensures confidentiality and integrity during email transmission. Additionally, technologies like SIMHA provide end-to-end encryption and digital signatures for individual messages, offering an extra layer of security for sensitive communications if you need it.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, when I type google.com into my browser, my computer knows exactly where to go. But google.com isn't an IP address, which is what machines actually use, right?
Correct.
So how does my computer figure that out? This must be a critical Layer 7 event.
That's DNS, the domain name system, often, and for very good reason, called the Internet's phone book.
Phone book, I like that.
Its primary function is exactly that: translate those human-readable domain names, like www.example.com, into the numeric IP addresses that browsers and other devices actually use to locate and communicate with each other. Without it, you'd be forced to memorize endless strings of numbers for every single site you visit. Utterly impossible.
It sounds simple on the surface, but I imagine there's a lot going on behind the scenes to make that lookup happen reliably. For someone like me who just types a URL, what's the most surprising or maybe complex part of that process?
What's truly fascinating here, and often surprising to people, is the complex, multi-step resolution process and the chain of trust it relies on.
Chain of trust, okay.
It starts with a recursive query from your device. If the address isn't in your browser's or operating system's local cache,
Which it often isn't for a new site.
right, the query is sent to a recursive DNS server, often operated by your internet service provider, your ISP. That recursive server then embarks on this series of iterative queries to external servers. It starts by asking a root name server,
Root server, okay.
which points it to the correct top-level domain, or TLD, name server, like the server for .com or .org.
Got it.
The TLD server, in turn, points to the authoritative name server for that specific domain. That authoritative server contains the final record linking the domain name to its corresponding IP address.
Wow, okay. Root, TLD, authoritative. It's quite a journey.
It's a truly distributed, hierarchical system, designed for resilience, but that very complexity, that distribution, also creates an attack surface.
It sounds absolutely essential, but that distributed nature also makes it feel like it could be a massive single point of failure or a prime target for attackers. Is DNS a significant attack vector?
It absolutely is. While DNS is critical for the Internet's function, it's also a significant and frequently targeted attack vector right at the application layer.
How so?
Well, a DNS query flood attack, for example, can overwhelm a DNS server with a high volume of seemingly legitimate queries, often for random, non-existent subdomains.
Just blasting it with requests.
Exactly. This consumes the server's resources, its processing power, memory, bandwidth, making the service unavailable for legitimate users. It effectively takes down entire websites or services that rely on that DNS resolution.
Wow.
Another major threat is DNS cache poisoning. That's where an attacker injects fraudulent data into a DNS resolver's cache, redirecting users from legitimate websites to malicious ones without them even knowing.
Ooh, that's sneaky. Sending you to the wrong place.
Very sneaky and very dangerous.
All right, we've laid the groundwork. We understand the application layer, the protocols. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty, the exploits. For anyone serious about web security, the OWASP Top 10 is almost like scripture.
It's foundational.
But for our listeners who are already pretty informed, what evolved in the most recent list, the 2021 list, that really reshaped how we think about Layer 7 threats.
You're right. The Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP, is foundational. Their top 10 isn't just a list. It's a widely referenced report. It ranks the most serious web application security risks, serving as a benchmark for developers and security pros.
A benchmark. Okay.
It's not comprehensive, but it's a consensus-driven guide. Helps focus efforts where they matter most. What's truly evolved, though, reflecting a growing maturity in the security landscape, is how the list now emphasizes systemic failures, not just isolated coding errors.
Systemic failures. Interesting. Like what?
Well, the 2021 version introduced significant, and I'd argue crucial changes. New categories like insecure design, that's A04.2 or 21, and software and data integrity failures, A08.2021, were added.
Insecure design. Okay.
Yeah, while others, like cross-site scripting, XSS, were consolidated into broader categories like injection. This evolution reflects a deeper understanding that attacks aren't just about single technical flaws in code anymore.
Right.
They're increasingly about systemic failures in an application's design, its architecture, and the overall process of developing and deploying software. Insecure design, for instance, explicitly points to missing or ineffective security controls in the application's architecture itself before a single line of code is even written.
Wow. So thinking about security right from the blueprint stage.
Exactly. It signifies a real shift in focus from reactive bug fixing to proactive security by design principles.
Okay, let's unpack one of the most dangerous and common types of attacks. One that's been around forever but is still incredibly effective, injection. What's fundamentally happening here? Why does it remain such a persistent threat?
Injection attacks exploit a fundamental failure in an application. Its inability to properly validate and sanitize user input. That's the core mechanic of compromise.
Input validation.
Okay. Yeah. Hostile data is sent to an interpreter on the server, causing it to execute unintended commands. It's like a malicious actor whispering a secret instruction to your application, cleverly crafting input that the application mistakes for executable code rather than just simple data.
Tricking the application.
Exactly. And it persists because, honestly, developers are still making fundamental errors in how they handle external input. It's a hard problem, but one we know how to solve.
And the poster child for injection attacks, the one most people have probably heard of, has to be SQL injection or SQI. Can you explain how that works, maybe with some examples that go beyond the absolute basics?
Sure. SQL injection is a prime example. Malicious SQL statements are inserted into an input field or maybe a query parameter, tricking the application into manipulating its underlying database.
Right.
This happens when an application concatenates user input directly into a SQL query string without properly treating that input as a literal value. Most listeners might know the classic OR11 trick to bypass authentication.
Yeah, the old login bypass.
Right. But the ingenuity of attackers goes much further. Attacks can be categorized. You have in-band SQL, that's the most direct, where the attacker uses the same communication channel to launch the attack and retrieve results, often using union operators to combine results from different tables.
Okay, direct results back.
Then there's the more sophisticated and often much harder to detect blind SQL.
Blind? Why blind?
It's used when the application's responses don't directly show the results of the injection. Maybe the page just looks slightly different or takes longer to load. The attacker has to infer the database's structure or data based on these indirect signals.
Okay, so they're feeling around in the dark.
Pretty much. This can be Boolean-based, where the attacker observes subtle changes in page content, maybe a login success versus failure message, based on a true or false condition they inject. Even more insidious is a time-based attack.
Time-based? How does that work?
The attacker inserts time delay functions, like sleep5, into the query. If the page suddenly takes 5 seconds longer to load, they know their injected condition was true.
Wow.
This allows them to systematically extract data, maybe one character at a time, entirely through observing timing differences. It's incredibly hard to detect without specialized tools.
Wow, that's incredibly clever and insidious. It really highlights how resourceful attackers can be. So, what's the primary non-negotiable defense against that kind of ingenuity?
The primary defense, the one that absolutely must be implemented, is to stop using insecure string concatenation to build SQL queries. Full stop.
Okay, what do you use instead?
Developers must use type-safe SQL parameters or prepared statements. These methods fundamentally ensure that all user input is treated strictly as data, never as executable code. This prevents the injection from manipulating the query logic, even if malicious characters are present in the input.
Got it. Treat input as data, not code.
That's the mantra.
And what about XSS? Cross-site scripting. We hear about that one a lot too, especially with web applications. How does it differ from SQL in terms of what it targets?
Right, XSS. It involves injecting malicious JavaScript or other client-side scripts into web pages that are then viewed by other users, unlike SQL, which targets the backend database.
XSS targets the user.
Exactly. XSS targets the user's browser. It exploits a website's trust in its own content. It makes the victim's browser execute the script as if it came from a trusted source, the website itself.
And that's dangerous because...
It's incredibly dangerous because that script, running in the context of the trusted site, can steal session cookies, hijack user sessions, deface websites, redirect users to malicious sites, or even install malware in the browser.
Okay. And you mentioned there are different types.
Yeah, we generally differentiate 3 main types. First, stored XSS or persistent XSS. This occurs when the malicious script is permanently saved on the web server, maybe in a comment field, a forum post, or a user's profile.
So it stays there.
It stays there. When another user views that affected page, the script is retrieved from the server and executed in their browser. It impacts anyone who visits that page until it's removed.
Okay, stored. What else?
Second, reflected XSS or non-persistent XSS. This happens when an attacker tricks a victim into clicking a malicious link. The malicious payload is submitted in the HTTP request and immediately reflected back to the user's browser in the server's response, where it's executed right away.
So it bounces off the server.
Exactly. It's more of a one-shot attack that typically requires user interaction, like clicking a specially crafted link.
Okay. And the third?
Third is DOM-based XSS. This is a more modern variant where the attack payload is executed entirely within the victim's browser. It happens as a result of a script manipulating the page's document object model, the DOM, after the page is loaded. This one doesn't even necessarily need interaction with the server after the initial page load. It relies purely on client-side vulnerabilities in the page's own scripts.
Okay, so stored, reflected, DOM-based. Got it.
Yeah.
Those are both about injecting malicious code, but SQL targets the back-end database, and XSS targets the user's front-end browser. Are there other types of injection that target the operating system itself?
Yes, definitely. Command injection is another powerful and incredibly dangerous variant.
It sounds bad.
It is. This vulnerability allows an attacker to execute arbitrary operating system, or OS, commands on the host server. They exploit an application's lack of proper input validation when it passes user input to a system shell or command interpreter.
And that leads to?
It can lead to a complete system compromise, enabling an attacker to install ransomware, steal sensitive data, exfiltrate files, or attain full control of the web server's underlying operating system.
Full control. Wow. Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine a web application that allows you to, say, ping a network address for diagnostics. If it takes user input directly and passes it to the ping command without sanitization,
Right.
an attacker could inject something like 8.8.8.8 RM/RF. On a Unix-like system, that semicolon acts as a command separator. So after the ping executes, it would then try to execute RMRF, which attempts to delete everything from the root directory.
That's terrifying. Gaining full control of the server OS is essentially game over. So how do we stop that kind of attack?
The core defense is multifaceted. First, Eliminate OS-level function calls from application code whenever humanly possible. Often there are safer, built-in library functions that achieve the same goal without invoking the OS shell.
Avoid the shell if you can.
Absolutely. If they are absolutely necessary, then a strict allow list approach for user input is crucial. This means only allowing pre-approved commands or very specific, tightly constrained parameters to be executed. Don't try to blacklist known bad commands. That's a losing battle. Only allow known good.
Allow list, not deny list.
Got it.
Okay, if you can't trust who you're talking to online, then what? Let's talk about broken authentication. This sounds like a fundamental breakdown of trust in the system itself.
Broken authentication is indeed a high-ranking OWASP vulnerability precisely because it refers to weaknesses in the processes and mechanisms used to verify a user's identity.
The login process, basically.
Exactly. These vulnerabilities allow attackers to bypass login systems, compromise credentials, maybe guess or steal session tokens, and ultimately assume a user's identity to gain unauthorized access to data or functionality. It's a gateway to impersonation, allowing an attacker to literally become you in the digital realm.
And once you're authenticated, you're usually in a session with the application, right? What can go wrong there, even if the initial login was actually secure?
Precisely. Once you're authenticated, the server creates a unique session identifier. It's typically stored as a cookie in your browser, and it's used to maintain your state across the stateless HTTP protocol.
Right, the cookie remembers you.
Yeah. Session hijacking occurs when an attacker manages to steal or guess this session ID to take over a legitimate user's active session. The attacker then gains complete access to the user's data and can perform operations on their behalf as if they were the legitimate user without needing to re-authenticate.
Wow. How do they steal the session ID?
There are various techniques. Session fixation involves forcing a user to use a specific attacker-controlled session ID, often by providing them a link with the ID already embedded before they even log in.
Okay.
Some applications use URL rewriting, embedding session IDs directly into the URL itself, which makes them vulnerable to interception if the URL is shared or logged. And as we just discussed, cross-site scripting, XSS, can be specifically used to inject scripts that are designed to steal session cookies from a victim's browser, basically handing the attacker the key to your active session.
So even if the initial login is secure, managing that session afterwards is a huge persistent vulnerability.
Yeah.
What about the login process itself, though? What are the common attacks right at the front door?
Yeah, vulnerabilities in the login process itself are a major entry point for attackers. We call these credential attacks if an application doesn't restrict the number of failed login attempts.
Like you can try passwords forever.
Exactly. An attacker can launch a brute force attack to systematically guess usernames and passwords until they succeed. A more insidious variation is credential stuffing.
Credential stuffing.
That's where an attacker uses a list of stolen usernames and passwords from other data breaches, often from completely unrelated websites, and tries them against the target application.
Because people reuse passwords.
Precisely. These attacks succeed with alarming frequency because users frequently reuse the same or similar passwords across multiple services. And, of course, weak password policies, which allow users to set common or easily guessable passwords like password123, are a major contributing factor to the success of both brute force and credential stuffing.
Right. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. DDoS attacks. Distributed denial of service. They're often in the news. They can be incredibly disruptive. But you mentioned Layer 7 DDoS earlier, and it sounds particularly nasty. Why is that? What makes it so insidious compared to other types of DDoS?
That's a critical distinction. Layer 7 DDoS attacks, or application layer attacks, are particularly insidious precisely because they target the application's specific vulnerabilities or resource-intensive functions, and they are incredibly difficult to distinguish from legitimate user traffic.
Harder to spot.
Much harder. Unlike volumetric DDoS attacks that simply try to overwhelm bandwidth by sending massive amounts of junk traffic, Layer 7 attacks don't necessarily require high bandwidth, but they are devastatingly effective with a relatively low volume of traffic because they hit components that consume a lot of server resources.
Like what?
Things like login pages, complex database queries, search functions, or form submissions. They aim to consume your application's processing power, CPU, and memory, making it unavailable for legitimate users. Effectively, they starve your application's ability to respond to genuine requests.
That makes perfect sense. It's not about the size of the flood, but specifically where it hits. Can you give us some specific examples of how these attacks manifest at Layer 7?
Certainly. The HTTP flood is probably the most common form of L7 DDoS. It overwhelms servers by sending a massive volume of seemingly legitimate GET or POSIX requests.
Just like lots of users.
Exactly. This exhausts the server's connection threads and its CPU memory resources as it desperately tries to process each request. It prevents legitimate users from accessing the service. Imagine a restaurant where 1,000 people simultaneously walk in, ask the waiter for the most complex dish on the menu, tying them up, but never actually order.
Got it. Ties up the staff.
Yeah. Then there's Slow Loris. This is a particularly ingenious low and slow attack.
Low and slow?
Yeah, it requires minimal bandwidth but has maximum impact. An attacker opens multiple connections to a web server and sends partial HTTP requests, but sends them at an extremely slow rate, never actually completing them.
So they just keep the connection open?
Indefinitely. This consumes all of the server's available concurrent connection resources, preventing any new legitimate users from connecting. It's like someone calling a busy hotline, maybe pressing a button every few seconds just to keep the line active, but never actually speaking, blocking the line for everyone else.
Wow, that's clever.
It is. And while technically targeting the DNS layer, a DNS query flood also manifests its impact at Layer 7 by overwhelming DNS servers with a high volume of queries, often for random, non-existent subdomains. The goal is to disrupt service availability by exhausting the DNS server's ability to resolve legitimate queries for your application.
These sound incredibly difficult to stop, precisely because they mimic normal traffic so well. What are the biggest challenges in mitigating them effectively?
Because Layer 7 DDoS attacks are cunningly designed to simulate normal user behavior, they often fly under the radar of traditional rate-based detection systems that just count traffic volume or packets per second.
Right, the volume might not even be that high.
Exactly. Effective mitigation requires much more sophisticated techniques, things like behavior-based analysis to spot subtle patterns that aren't quite right, request fingerprinting to identify known bot signatures, and progressive security challenges.
Like CAP-TCHAs.
Yeah, CAP-TCHAs or sometimes JavaScript challenges, things that can differentiate automated bots from legitimate human users. It's a continuous cat-and-mouse game demanding adaptive, intelligent defense systems that can learn and evolve.
Okay. Let's talk about another subtle yet dangerous attack. Cross-site request forgery, or CSRF. It sounds complex, but it's often described as one of those attacks that exploits browser trust. What's the core idea here?
Cross-site request forgery, CSRF, it's truly insidious because it tricks an authenticated user, someone who's already logged in, into performing an unwanted action on a web application where they're currently active.
Tricking the logged-in user.
Yeah. It exploits the browser's implicit trust in the user session. Here's how it works. If you're logged into a legitimate site, say, your online bank, your browser automatically includes your session cookies in any request sent to that bank's domain.
Right, that's how you stay logged in.
Exactly. An attacker crafts a malicious website, maybe with an embedded form or even just an image tag, that when you simply visit it, your browser automatically sends a forged request to the target site, your bank. Because you're logged in, your browser automatically includes your valid session cookie with that forged request.
Oh, no.
And the target server, the bank, processes it as a legitimate action from you, completely without your knowledge or consent. This could be anything from changing your password, transferring funds, posting spam, or even deleting your account. It's like someone tricking your browser into signing a blank check and sending it off.
So how is this different from XSS? It sounds a little similar with scripts and malicious actions, but you've always emphasized that they're distinct.
That's a critical question and a crucial distinction for understanding Layer 7 attacks.
Oh.
XSS, remember, involves the injection of malicious code into a trusted site. The goal is to compromise your browser and give the attacker direct access to your client-side environment and data.
Okay, XSS gets code in the browser.
Right. CSRF, in contrast, does not inject code into the target site. Instead, it exploits the trust relationship between your browser and the target site to force a legitimate but unintended action. It leverages your existing authentication to perform an action, all without the attacker ever gaining direct access to your session data or compromising your browser directly.
Ah, okay. CSRF makes your browser do something bad using your own login.
Yeah.
XSS tries to steal your login or data.
That's a good way to put it. CSRF abuses trust. XSS injects malice.
That distinction is really important for defense. So what's the primary non-negotiable defense against CSRF? How do you stop your browser from sending that forged request?
The primary defense against CSRF is the use of anti-CSRF tokens, also called synchronizer tokens.
Anti-CSRF tokens, how do they work?
The server embeds a unique, unpredictable, and typically cryptographically strong value the token into each web form it serves to the user, usually as a hidden field. The server then expects this exact token to be included in the subsequent requests submitted by the user. Because an attacker hosting their malicious site elsewhere cannot guess this random, unique value associated with your specific session, they cannot forge a valid request that includes the correct token. The server will simply reject any request that lacks the expected token or has an incorrect one. This effectively breaks the attack chain.
Makes sense. The attacker can't guess the secret handshake.
Exactly.
Beyond these specific attack types, what about those broader systemic issues that cause vulnerabilities? It feels like sometimes the biggest problems aren't about a clever hack, but just a fundamental oversight in how systems are set up or maintained.
You're absolutely right. Beyond the sophisticated exploit techniques, some of the most pervasive and frankly easily exploited Layer 7 vulnerabilities stem from systemic failures in process and basic maintenance. Security misconfigurations are a huge one. They consistently rank high on the OWASP top 10.
Misconfigurations, leaving defaults.
Exactly. This refers to improperly configured servers, APIs, databases, or security settings that inadvertently expose sensitive information or create unintended access points. Common examples include leaving default administrative passwords unchanged on web servers or databases, enabling unnecessary features or services that just create new attack vectors, or providing overly verbose error messages.
Why are verbose errors bad?
Because they can leak sensitive information about the system's underlying architecture, maybe the database schema, specific software versions, or internal state to a potential attacker. These are often self-inflicted wounds, just basic setup mistakes.
And what about all the different pieces of software that make up a modern application? Seems like very few things are built entirely from scratch these days. Lots of libraries and frameworks.
Indeed. And that leads to another major systemic issue: using vulnerable and outdated components. Modern applications and platforms rely heavily on third-party libraries, frameworks, and modules, many of which are open source.
Which is great for development speed.
It is. But if these components aren't regularly updated and patched, they can contain publicly known vulnerabilities, often identified by CVE numbers, common vulnerabilities and exposures. Attackers actively scan the internet for applications, using these known vulnerable libraries to gain an easy initial foothold.
So you inherit the risks of your dependencies.
Precisely. The Equifax breach, which we'll discuss more later, is the classic catastrophic example of how a massive failure can stem directly from a single, well-known, unpatched vulnerability in a widely used third-party framework. It's a matter of ensuring the entire software supply chain you rely on is secure, not just the code you write yourself.
Okay, so we've walked through a pretty dizzying array of potential attack vectors and vulnerabilities at the application layer. It can feel a bit overwhelming, honestly.
It can, yeah.
But how do we defend against all of this? Is it just about putting up a WAF at the very end of the process, or is there a more holistic approach?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a truly robust Layer 7 defense begins not at the network perimeter, but much, much earlier. It starts at the earliest stages of the software development lifecycle, or SDLC. We call this shifting left.
Shifting left, meaning earlier in the timeline.
Exactly. It means integrating security considerations right from the initial design and coding phases, continuing through testing, deployment, and ongoing maintenance, rather than treating security as some final bolt-on checklist item right before launch.
So bake it in, don't bolt it on.
That's the idea. Proactively addressing vulnerabilities during development significantly minimizes risks and costs before an application is even exposed to the public internet, where the stakes are far, far higher.
That sounds like a fundamental shift in how organizations need to approach security.
Yeah.
What are some of those key practices that developers and teams should be adopting early on in that SDLC?
Key practices include things like threat modeling. That's where you proactively identify potential threats and vulnerabilities in the application's design phase before you even write any code.
Thinking like an attacker from the start.
Exactly. Also, secure coding training for developers so they understand common pitfalls like injection or misconfigurations and know the best practices to avoid them. And continuous security testing throughout the SDLC, not just at the end, using tools like static application security testing, SAST, which analyzes source code, and dynamic application security testing, DAST, which tests the running application. This embeds security as an ongoing concern, not just an afterthought reviewed weeks before release.
Okay, that makes sense. Thinking about secure coding, what's the absolute foundational principle? The one thing that everyone should always keep in mind when they're writing code that handles any kind of user input.
The single most foundational defense against a majority of Layer 7 vulnerabilities is this. Assume all external data is untrusted and must be rigorously validated and sanitized.
Assume guilty until proven innocent.
Pretty much. This is the absolute primary defense against all forms of injection attacks. SQL injection, XSS, command injection, you name it. Never, ever trust what comes in from the user or any external system. Always treat it as potentially hostile until you've proven otherwise through validation.
So if I'm making a web form that takes user input, should I check the input on the user's computer, in their browser, to give them quick feedback if they type something wrong?
That's a critical best practice to clarify. Perform all security-critical input validation on a trusted system, like the server, not solely on the client side, meaning in the user's browser.
Not just in the browser. Why not?
While client-side validation can definitely offer a better user experience by providing immediate feedback, it can be easily bypassed by a malicious user. They can simply disable JavaScript in their browser or use developer tools to manipulate the client-side code and submit anything they want.
Okay. So client-side is for user experience, server-side is for security.
Exactly. Server-side validation is non-negotiable and absolutely essential because it cannot be circumvented by an attacker. Always validate on the server. Anything less is insecure.
And when you're deciding what input to allow, is it better to try and block all the known bad stuff, or is it better to only allow known good stuff?
The most effective strategy by far is an allow list approach, sometimes called whitelist validation. All input is denied by default unless it explicitly matches a specific set of predefined allowed data types, formats, lengths, or ranges.
Deny by default.
Deny by default. This is far more robust and secure than a deny list or blacklist approach, which tries to filter out known malicious input. The problem with deny lists is they're easily defeated by new or unforeseen attack vectors or clever encodings that the deny list doesn't know about yet. An allow list is a proactive, secure by design approach, whereas a deny list is reactive and inherently incomplete.
Allow list is stronger. Got it. You mentioned SQL injection earlier as one of the most dangerous. What's the specific defense there that developers absolutely must implement to prevent those devastating database compromises?
For SQL injection specifically, the most effective and widely recommended solution is to use prepared statements and parameterized queries.
Prepared statements and parameterized queries.
Okay. These techniques fundamentally separate the user input from the executable SQL code. They ensure that the input is always treated strictly as data, a literal value, and cannot be interpreted by the database as executable code or commands, no matter what characters it contains. This mechanism effectively prevents the injection from manipulating the query logic. It's a robust, built-in solution provided by most modern database interfaces.
So the database itself helps protect you if you use these features correctly.
Yes, absolutely.
Beyond just input validation, what are some other overarching secure coding principles that developers should really live by to build truly resilient Layer 7 applications?
Yeah, beyond rigorous input validation, other critical principles include the principle of least privilege.
Least privilege, okay.
This means limiting an application's own permissions and a user's access rights to only the absolute minimum set of privileges necessary to complete their specific task. If an account or the application itself gets compromised, the potential damage is minimized because its permissions are restricted.
Makes sense. Don't give it keys it doesn't need.
Exactly. Then there's defense in depth. This means implementing multiple redundant layers of security controls throughout the application and the infrastructure. The idea is if one layer of defense fails or is bypassed, another layer is there to catch the attack or limit its impact. Don't rely on a single control.
Layers, like an onion.
Sort of, yeah. And finally, proper error handling. Avoid those verbose error messages we talked about earlier, the ones that can inadvertently provide an attacker with sensitive information about the system's underlying architecture, database schema, or internal state. Error messages shown to users should be generic and uninformative to an attacker, acting like a blank, uninformative wall. Log the details for your own debugging, but don't expose them.
Okay, least privilege, defense in depth, proper error handling. Got it. Now, we mentioned web application firewalls, WFs, earlier as a key architectural control for Layer 7 defense. How do they actually work to protect us at the application layer? What makes them different from a regular network firewall?
Right, the WF, it's a key architectural component for Layer 7 security. It acts as a reverse proxy. It sits strategically between external users and your web application.
In front of the web server.
Exactly. Its job is to meticulously filter, monitor, and block malicious HTTP and HTTPS traffic before it ever reaches the server. Unlike a traditional network firewall that operates down at layers 3 and 4, focusing on IPs and ports, a Wave is specifically designed to analyze each request at the application layer. It inspects the actual content and logic of web requests, looking for things like SQL injection patterns, XSS scripts, command injection attempts, and known attack signatures. This makes it a powerful first line of defense.
So it's inspecting the actual content of the web traffic, the HTTP request.
Yep.
How does it know what's bad and what's good, especially with new threats constantly emerging? That sounds complex.
It is complex. WAFs operate based on a set of customizable security policies or rule sets that define what traffic is considered malicious and what is safe. These policies are often aligned with standards like the OWASP Top 10, providing a trusted framework for protection against common attacks.
So it uses rules.
It uses rules, but what's even more impressive is how modern WAFs are evolving. They're moving beyond just static, signature-based models. Many now incorporate machine learning and self-tuning capabilities.
Machine learning, how does that help?
The machine learning helps the WAF understand what normal traffic looks like for your specific application. It can then spot anomalies and new attack patterns that might not match a predefined signature. This automation also helps reduce the administrative overhead of constantly updating rules manually, allows the WAF to adapt more quickly to new threats and application changes, and critically helps minimize false positives.
False positives blocking legitimate users.
Yeah.
That's important.
Exactly. Reducing false positives helps avoid alert fatigue for security teams by only flagging genuine threats, making the WAF much more effective in practice.
That sounds like an indispensable tool.
Yeah.
But does a WAF replace my traditional network firewall? Or are they two completely different things that work together?
That's an important distinction to make. WFs and network firewalls are not competing solutions. They are fundamentally complementary. They work together.
Complementary, okay.
A Wave addresses application-specific threats, those Layer 7 attacks like SQL, XSS, CSRF, that a traditional network firewall simply cannot see or understand because it operates at a higher layer and understands the nuances of web application protocols. Meanwhile, a network firewall protects a wider range of traffic types at the lower layers of the stack, blocking unauthorized access to ports or IP addresses, stopping different kinds of network-level attacks.
So you need both for different kinds of protection.
Exactly. It's about building that robust, multi-layered defense where each component plays a distinct and vital role. It's a true defense-in-depth strategy for your network perimeter and application stack.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, we talked quite a bit about identity compromise, broken authentication, session hijacking, credential stuffing. What's the absolute best defense here? How do we make sure only authorized users get in and, crucially, stay secure throughout their session?
Strong authentication is absolutely fundamental to preventing these identity-based attacks. The primary recommendation today, and one that has dramatically shifted the security landscape for the better, is to move beyond simple username and password authentication. You need to implement multi-factor authentication, MFA.
MFA.
Yeah.
Something you know, something you have, something you are.
Exactly. MFA requires users to provide 2 or more distinct forms of verification factors to prove their identity, like a password, something you know, plus a one-time code from an authenticator app on your phone, something you have, or maybe a biometric scan like a fingerprint, something you are.
And why is that so much better?
It significantly reduces the risk of account compromise from brute force attacks or stolen credentials. Because even if an attacker steals your password, they still need that second factor, which is usually much harder to obtain. It makes gaining unauthorized access exponentially harder.
Makes sense. A much higher bar for the attacker. And what about the passwords themselves? Are strong password policies still relevant if we have MFA, or can we relax those?
That's a good question. For applications that still rely on passwords, even as one factor in MFA, strong policies are absolutely still a necessity.
Still important.
Still important. This includes enforcing minimum length and complexity requirements, disallowing the use of common or easily guessable passwords, like password 123 or QWERTY, checking against lists of breached passwords, and crucially, using a modern cryptographically secure hashing algorithm like bcrypt or Argon2 to store passwords in the database.
Hashing. That scrambles the password.
Right. It transforms the password into a secure, one-way hash that cannot be reversed back into the original plaintext password. This protects the passwords even if the database itself is breached. It's vital to avoid outdated and easily crackable hashing algorithms like MD5 or SHA-1. It's about building in resilience, assuming a breach will eventually happen.
Assume breach. Okay. And once someone's logged in, how do we keep that session secure and prevent that session hijacking we talked about?
Secure session management practices are crucial for protecting authenticated sessions after the initial login. This involves using cryptographically strong, unpredictable, and preferably short-lived session tokens.
Short-lived tokens, okay.
Yeah, limit the window of opportunity if a token is compromised. Also, implementing robust timeout policies to automatically log out inactive users after a reasonable period of inactivity. And critically, explicitly invalidating sessions on the server side after a user actively logs out, or perhaps after a password change. These measures ensure that even if a session token is somehow stolen, its utility to an attacker is severely limited in time and scope.
Makes sense. Limit the lifespan of the keys.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've talked about building defenses, secure coding, WAFs, MFA. But no single defense is ever foolproof, right? Attackers are persistent. New vulnerabilities are always emerging. So what happens if something does get through all those defenses we've just discussed? How do organizations detect and respond effectively?
That's a critical point, because you're right, it's often not a matter of if you'll be attacked, but when. A comprehensive security strategy must include continuous monitoring, robust logging, and regular auditing. These are essential to detect and respond to attacks that inevitably bypass those initial preventative defenses. It's about continuous vigilance and having a well-rehearsed incident response plan ready to go. You have to assume compromise will occur at some point.
What does monitoring and auditing actually look like in practice for a modern organization?
Yeah.
Especially when dealing with these complex Layer 7 attacks that might look like normal traffic.
Centralized logging is absolutely critical, especially in today's complex distributed environments like cloud-native applications and microservices.
Centralized logging, bringing all the logs together.
Exactly. It allows security teams to collect and correlate security events from across multiple platforms, services, servers, and devices. This makes it much easier to identify unusual behavior or subtle attack patterns that might indicate an ongoing attack that spans multiple systems. You need the full picture. Furthermore, automated security solutions, often powered by machine learning and AI, can analyze these vast amounts of log data in real time. They use behavioral analytics to establish a baseline of normal activity and then detect anomalies or deviations from that baseline. This significantly reduces the workload on human security teams and enables a more proactive defense, potentially catching subtle threats that human eyes might easily miss in the noise.
So it's not enough to just set up defenses and walk away. You have to keep looking for new weaknesses, even within your own systems, and actively hunt for threats.
Exactly right. Regular security testing, such as penetration testing, where ethical hackers simulate real-world attacks against your systems to find weaknesses, and source code audits, is essential for identifying and remediating vulnerabilities before they can be exploited by malicious actors.
Pen testing.
And another valuable approach is a bug bounty program. This involves inviting ethical hackers from the wider security community to find and report vulnerabilities in your systems, usually in exchange for a reward. It provides a continuous, real-world security assessment that complements your internal efforts, giving you a much wider net of expertise and often catching issues you might not have foreseen internally.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Continuous vigilance. Now, we've covered the theory, the attacks, the defense strategies. Let's bring it all together with some real-world examples that really underscore these lessons. Let's look at one of the biggest, most impactful cybercrimes in recent history, the 2017 Equifax data breach. What happened there, and how did it leverage Layer 7 weaknesses?
The 2017 Equifax data breach was indeed one of the largest on record, compromising the deeply personal records of over 147 million Americans, plus others internationally. The initial attack vector, the way the attackers got in, was a well-known vulnerability in the Apache Struts web application framework.
Apache Struts. That's a common web framework, right?
Very common, yes. Specifically, the vulnerability was identified as CVE 2017-5638. And here's the key point. A critical security patch for this vulnerability was actually released by Apache on March 7, 2017, urging organizations using struts to update immediately. This was a classic Layer 7 web application vulnerability that allowed remote code execution.
So a patch was available weeks, maybe months, before the breach happened. But Equifax was still breached. That suggests a deeper issue than just a single technical flaw. What was the core, maybe chilling lesson here?
What's truly chilling, and frankly infuriating for many, is that Equifax failed to patch the affected server on its online consumer credit dispute website, despite being aware of the vulnerability and its potential for exploitation. Their internal processes failed.
Failed to patch a critical known vulnerability.
Yes. And this wasn't just a one-time oversight. Subsequent investigations revealed it was a symptom of a systemic organizational breakdown. An internal audit back in 2015, years earlier, had already flagged a significant backlog of unresolved vulnerabilities and a severe lack of a comprehensive asset inventory. They didn't even know everything they had online.
Wow.
Their patching process was reportedly decentralized and relied on an honor system without strict enforcement or prioritization of critical internet-facing assets. The central chilling lesson from Equifax is that the most catastrophic breaches often aren't due to some brilliant, zero-day, uncrackable new exploit, but a simple, almost mundane failure. The inability to patch a known critical vulnerability in a timely manner.
Basic security hygiene.
Exactly. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the biggest threat isn't the sophisticated nation-state hacker, but the overlooked basic IT and security process failures within your own organization.
And once the attackers were in through that unpatched struts vulnerability, how did they manage to do so much damage and stay hidden for so long? 76 days, you said.
Right, 76 days undetected. After gaining that initial access, the attackers moved laterally through Equifax's network to access and eventually exfiltrate highly sensitive credit monitoring data. They remained undetected for so long, partly due to other compounding security weaknesses. Reports indicated things like admin being used as a default username and password on some systems, a classic misconfiguration.
Oh, come on. Admin.
Apparently so in some cases, and reportedly a complete lack of multi-factor authentication on accounts with high levels of access. They were able to use these weak or stolen credentials to access and query internal databases as seemingly authorized users, effectively impersonating legitimate staff and evading detection for over 2 months while they mapped the network and stole data.
A cascade of failures. Okay, let's turn to Yahoo, which experienced its own cascade of massive breaches over several years. These seem like textbook examples of how things can go wrong, perhaps due to a culture of security neglect.
Indeed. The Yahoo data breaches are another stark textbook example of how a cascade of systemic failures and, arguably, security neglect can lead to catastrophic compromise on an almost unimaginable scale. The 2012 breach, which affected around 450,000 user accounts on their Yahoo Voices platform, was caused by a union-based SQL injection attack, a quintessential Layer 7 exploit we discussed earlier.
SQL injection again.
Yep. But the truly alarming part of this incident was that the compromised passwords obtained through the SQL attack were not properly encrypted or hashed. They were reportedly stored in plain text in the database.
Plain text passwords. In 2012.
Plain text. This critical security oversight allowed the attackers to immediately publish the raw passwords online, significantly increasing the potential for their misuse on other websites where users had inevitably reused those same credentials.
Unbelievable. And then there was an even larger breach just a year later in 2013, which sounded far more sophisticated than a basic SQL. What happened there?
Yes, the larger 2013 breach, which Yahoo eventually admitted, affected all 3 billion of its user accounts at the time.
3 billion.
3 billion. It involved a more sophisticated attack vector. The attackers managed to steal Yahoo's proprietary source code related to how they generated session cookies.
They stole the cookie recipe.
Essentially, yes. This allowed the attackers to forge fake, valid-looking cookies for any Yahoo account. With these forged cookies, they could access user accounts without needing the login credentials at all, making the attack virtually undetectable through standard login monitoring for about 3 years.
Wow, so they could just walk in the front door using fake keys.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Compounding this, investigations revealed that some user passwords associated with these accounts were still protected only by the weak and long-broken MD5 hashing function, making a large portion of the underlying passwords easily crackable through offline brute force methods once the database was obtained.
This sounds like a perfect storm of vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
SQL, plain text passwords, stolen cookie code, weak hashing. What's the key takeaway about how this could happen at such a massive, well-known tech company?
It raises a profound question, doesn't it? How did this happen? It was really a stark example of institutional complacency and what appears to have been a pervasive security culture problem rather than just a single technical flaw. Multiple separate vulnerabilities across different parts of their systems, from basic SQL injection and weak password hashing to fundamentally broken session management, and reportedly a lack of executive prioritization and funding for security were exploited over several years.
So it wasn't just one thing.
Not at all. It showed that neglecting security, even in seemingly minor areas or older legacy systems, creates this long-term compounding series of vulnerabilities. Attackers can then chain these weaknesses together for devastating impact. It's a testament to the fact that security has to be a continuous top-down commitment deeply embedded in an organization's culture and DNA, not just a checkbox exercise.
Absolutely. Now, the SolarWinds attack in 2020, that was a huge wake-up call for the entire cybersecurity world, wasn't it? It fundamentally changed how many organizations think about trusting their software vendors,
Yeah.
the whole supply chain.
Absolutely. The 2020 SolarWinds attack was a watershed moment. A true paradigm shift from focusing primarily on direct application layer attacks to understanding the immense risk of highly sophisticated supply chain attacks.
Supply chain attack, meaning they didn't attack the end user directly.
Exactly. The attackers, widely believed to be a Russian nation-state adversary group, did not directly target a customer's network through a traditional exploit like SQL or XSS. Instead, they infiltrated SolarWinds' own internal build systems, and they injected a Trojanized backdoor into a legitimate software update file for SolarWinds' widely used Orion network management platform.
They put malware inside a legitimate update.
Precisely.
So the malware came from a trusted source, a digitally signed update from the vendor itself. That's incredibly insidious because it bypasses so many traditional perimeter defenses, right?
What's truly fascinating and terrifying here is exactly that point. The malicious code, dubbed Sunburst, was digitally signed by SolarWinds using their legitimate code signing certificate. This made it appear entirely trustworthy to the systems installing it.
So security tools wouldn't flag it.
Generally, no. It was then distributed through SolarWinds' normal update channels to approximately 18,000 of its customers, including major government agencies and Fortune 500 companies worldwide. It effectively bypassed traditional perimeter defenses because the malware came from a trusted source and was installed internally.
And once it was installed,
Once the malicious update was installed, the attackers had a remote foothold, a back door, on the customer's network. From there, they could move laterally, carefully exploring and exploiting systems, selecting high-value targets for further intrusion. They demonstrated significant effort to evade detection, using techniques like code obfuscation, mimicking legitimate Orion network traffic, and constantly rotating their command and control infrastructure to stay hidden.
So what are the central lessons for supply chain security from this attack? It feels like it completely reshaped how we define trust in the software we use.
It really did. It highlighted the critical, urgent importance of securing the entire software supply chain, from development to distribution. The traditional model of implicitly trusting a digitally signed piece of software from a known vendor is simply no longer sufficient.
Can't just trust the signature anymore.
Not blindly. Organizations must now implement new measures to validate the security posture of their vendors and the software they provide. This includes demanding things like independent security reviews, performing binary analysis, continuous monitoring of third-party components for any anomalies or unexpected behavior, and increasingly demanding a software bill of materials, SBOM.
SBOM, what's that?
A software bill of materials is like an ingredients list for software. It details all the third-party libraries, modules, and components included in an application. This helps organizations understand their exposure if a vulnerability is found in one of those components later on.
Okay, know what's in your software.
Exactly. The SolarWinds attack also underscored the critical need for robust logging and, importantly, long-term retention of those logs. Many organizations tragically discovered they didn't even keep network or authentication logs long enough to determine if they had been compromised by the Sunburst backdoor or what the full extent of the damage was months later.
Wow, didn't even have the evidence. Okay, one more major case. The 2013 Target data breach. This is another classic example,
Right.
often cited for highlighting the risks associated with third-party access to an organization's network.
Yes, the Target breach was another stark reminder, specifically about third-party risk management. The initial attack vector wasn't a direct assault on Target's main network, which was reportedly quite well defended at the time. Instead, the attackers gained entry through a phishing email sent to an employee of Fazio Mechanical Services.
Mechanical. Who were they?
They were a third-party HVAC vendor that did work for Target stores. This just shows that your potential attack surface extends far beyond your own immediate employees and systems to encompass every single vendor, partner, or contractor you give any kind of network access to, no matter how seemingly limited.
So they got in through an HVAC vendor with presumably limited network access. How did they then manage to pivot from there to highly sensitive consumer payment data? That seems like a massive leap.
It does. Once the attackers stole the vendor's network credentials through that phishing attack, they used them to access a Target-hosted web service or portal specifically designed for outside vendors. From there, through a series of privilege escalation techniques and lateral movement across the network, they eventually reached Target's point of sale, or POS, servers the cash registers in the stores.
They got to the tills from the HVAC vendor portal.
This exposed two critical failures in Target's defenses at the time. First, weak third-party vendor management and oversight. The vendor reportedly lacked broadly accepted information security practices, yet still had network access. Second, and perhaps more significantly, a flat network design within Target's internal network. There wasn't proper segmentation between different parts of the network.
Flat network, meaning everything could talk to everything else.
Largely, yes. This lack of internal segmentation allowed the attackers to pivot relatively easily from a supposedly limited access vendor portal all the way over to the highly sensitive network segment containing the POS systems and consumer payment data without encountering significant technical barriers or firewalls along the way.
Wow. So once they were in, they could move around freely.
To a large extent, yes. The attackers then deployed malware onto the POS systems designed to scrape credit card data directly from the machine's memory as cards were swiped. And then they exfiltrated that stolen data using, ironically, FTP, that insecure Layer 7 protocol we discussed earlier, to servers outside Target's network.
What's the main takeaway for organizations from the Target breach? It sounds like a powerful lesson in network segmentation and vendor risk.
The main takeaway is absolutely that a company's attack surface extends far beyond its own direct assets. It includes every vendor, partner, and third party with any level of access to its network. Robust vendor risk management programs are essential. This includes thoroughly vetting third-party security postures before granting access, contractually obligating them to meet your security standards, and limiting their access based on the principle of least privilege.
Vet your vendors.
And equally important is stringent network segmentation. Design your internal network so that even if one segment is compromised, whether it's a vendor portal, a user workstation, or even a server, the breach can be contained and prevented from spreading laterally to more sensitive areas, like payment systems or customer databases. You have to assume a third party will eventually be compromised, so you build internal walls to limit their potential blast radius.
Assume breach, segment the network. Got it. These big, high-profile cases are incredibly impactful, but there are countless other breaches, maybe smaller ones, that reinforce these same lessons about Layer 7 vulnerabilities and defenses, right? It's not just these giants that get hit.
Indeed, the lessons are consistently reinforced across breaches of all sizes. The 2023 Moviet transfer breach, for instance, which ended up exposing millions of records across hundreds, maybe thousands of organizations worldwide, that was a classic SQL injection vulnerability in a widely used managed file transfer solution.
SQL injection again.
Again, it just reinforces the persistent need for rigorous input sanitization and robust waifs at the application layer, even in supposedly secure enterprise software. The 2021 Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, while ultimately a ransomware incident, the initial access vector reportedly exploited a dormant VPN account that wasn't protected by multi-factor authentication. It just underscores the vital role of MFA as a primary defense against credential compromise leading to network access.
MFA everywhere.
Pretty much. And even the massive 2018 GitHub DDoS attack, which peaked at an astonishing 1.35 terabits per second flood. While largely volumetric, targeting network bandwidth, it also had application layer components. It highlighted the need for robust CDN, content delivery network usage and intelligent rate limiting, specifically designed to absorb and mitigate application layer flooding, protecting the very public face of an application from being overwhelmed. These aren't just one-off events. They are recurring patterns of vulnerability exploitation. The same mistakes get made, the same defenses get overlooked.
It's clear the threats are persistent. Okay, looking ahead now, AI and machine learning are everywhere, infiltrating almost every industry and application. What new Layer 7 challenges do they bring to the table? Are we seeing entirely new categories of attacks emerge?
Here's where it gets really interesting and, quite frankly, a little daunting for defenders. AI and ML applications present a fundamentally new and incredibly complex attack surface. Traditional security tools designed for conventional software often aren't equipped to handle these new threats. We're moving beyond just finding bugs in code to exploiting flaws in logic and data dependencies.
Exploiting logic. Okay.
One prominent new attack vector is prompt injection. This specifically targets large language models, or LLMs like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc.
Prompt injection, like SQL injection, but for AI prompts.
Kind of. An attacker crafts a malicious input, a prompt, designed to manipulate the model into ignoring its built-in safety rules or instructions. They try to trick it into leaking sensitive information it shouldn't have access to, generating harmful content, or performing unintended actions based on hidden instructions embedded within the prompt.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Research has demonstrated how a cleverly crafted calendar invite containing hidden instructions could trick Google's Gemini AI assistant into performing false scheduling or potentially exfiltrating data from the user's connected services, simply by structuring the input text in a way the model interprets as a command rather than just data. It's a new form of injection that exploits the model's intelligence and interpretation capabilities, not a buffer overflow or a typical code vulnerability.
That's a fascinating and scary new twist on injection. What other AI-specific threats are emerging that exploit the very nature of machine learning itself?
Another really insidious threat is data poisoning.
Poisoning the data.
Exactly. Attackers subtly inject misleading or harmful data into the massive data sets used to train a machine learning model. The goal is to distort its learning process, perhaps creating hidden backdoors or biases. Since many AI models scrape vast amounts of data from open-source repositories, websites, and online forums, malicious actors can potentially upload manipulated content, text, images, code that, when ingested during training, biases the model. This could cause it to fail unexpectedly, act unpredictably when certain triggers are encountered in its input later on, or even leak information.
Wow, so you attack the model before it's even built?
Essentially, yes. For instance, there was a famous case where a poisoned document, when processed by an AI connector, was reportedly able to enable data theft from Google Drive via OpenAI's ChatGPT connectors by manipulating the model's behavior based on that poisoned training data. The challenge is that these attacks don't necessarily leave traditional malware signatures. They're embedded in the data itself.
So these aren't traditional code exploits in the sense we've been discussing. How do you even defend against something that exploits the logic of a model or its training data, rather than a bug in its application code?
Precisely. That's the challenge. These attacks often bypass traditional security tools because they exploit the model's logic, its interpretation, and its data dependencies, not code vulnerabilities in the traditional sense. Securing AI applications requires entirely new, specialized defenses. We need to focus on protecting the entire data pipeline, from collection through labeling to training. We need techniques for hardening the model itself, perhaps through adversarial training.
Adversarial training.
That's essentially training the model specifically to recognize and resist known types of malicious inputs or manipulations, making it more robust. And of course, implementing robust access controls and continuous monitoring throughout the entire AI lifecycle, from development to deployment. It truly demands a paradigm shift in how we approach application security.
Definitely a new frontier. Okay, what about the explosion of IoT devices? Everything from smart thermostats and cameras in our homes to industrial sensors controlling critical infrastructure. Are they creating new weak links in the application layer, given their sheer number and often limited resources?
That's an important question, and the answer is a resounding yes. The sheer volume of devices in the Internet of Things, or IoT ecosystem, presents a unique and growing set of Layer 7 challenges, largely due to their resource-constrained nature.
Resource-constrained, meaning they're not powerful computers.
Exactly. While many IoT applications are certainly susceptible to traditional vulnerabilities like injection attacks and especially weak authentication, many of these devices simply lack the hardware capabilities, the processing power, the memory for complex encryption algorithms, or robust security software. This often makes their communication vulnerable to message interception or manipulation via spyware or man-in-the-middle attacks. Often, they can't even run a sophisticated agent or implement complex secure coding practices required for other systems.
So they're not just vulnerable individually, but could they be used in large-scale attacks, like those botnets we hear about?
Absolutely. The immense scale of the IoT landscape makes these devices a prime target for recruitment into large-scale Layer 7 DDoS botnets. An attacker can compromise thousands, even millions, of insecure devices, cameras, routers, DVRs, smart appliances, and orchestrate them into massive botnets to flood a target application with seemingly legitimate requests, overwhelming its resources.
How do they get compromised so easily?
These devices often suffer from notoriously poor security practices, things like hard-coded or default passwords that users can't or don't change, a chronic lack of regular security patches from the manufacturers, and heavy reliance on outdated or vulnerable third-party software libraries. This creates a significant, easily exploitable attack surface that can be weaponized with devastating effect, as we saw years ago with the Mirai botnet, which leveraged exactly these kinds of vulnerabilities in IoT devices for massive DDoS attacks.
A massive distributed weak link. Okay, let's talk about the shift to the cloud. Cloud-native architectures, microservices, serverless functions, they're all about flexibility and scalability, which sounds great.
Mm.
But what about Layer 7 security in these new dynamic environments? Does it get easier or harder to protect the application layer there?
That's a key question architects grapple with. This architectural shift fundamentally changes the Layer 7 security landscape, and unfortunately, in many ways, it significantly increases the application's attack surface.
Increases it. Why?
Think about it. In a traditional monolithic application, there's typically a single, well-defined point of entry to secure. A microservices architecture, in contrast, is composed of numerous independent services, each potentially running in its own container or environment, communicating with each other via APIs. Each of those services and each of those APIs can serve as a potential point of entry or a point of failure.
So many more doors to protect.
Yeah. Exactly. This creates a much larger number of entry points and inter-service communication paths that must be individually secured, authenticated, authorized, and continuously monitored. It's like going from securing one main castle gate to defending hundreds of tiny interconnected doors and windows.
And what about serverless functions? They're so ephemeral, they spin up, do a job, and disappear in milliseconds. How do you secure something that barely exists for any length of time?
That's another major challenge. The ephemeral, often stateless nature of serverless functions makes traditional security controls, which often rely on static, long-lived server environments, incredibly difficult to implement effectively.
Why?
How do you patch a server that only exists for a few milliseconds? How do you install a security agent?
Right.
And with the rise of infrastructure as code, where your entire cloud infrastructure servers, networks, databases, functions is defined and deployed using scripts, security misconfigurations can be accidentally replicated across a huge number of components with a single flawed script. This poses a severe and rapidly scalable risk that can compromise your entire environment almost instantly if not caught early.
So, new architecture, new problems. What are the new defense strategies needed here? How do you handle this increased attack surface and the ephemeral nature of cloud native?
Defending these highly dynamic environments requires entirely new strategies and tools. API gateways become crucial. They act as single managed entry points for external traffic, destined for your microservices or serverless functions. They allow you to enforce security policies consistently, handle authentication and authorization like validating JWT tokens, perform rate limiting, and manage data privileges centrally before requests even reach the backend services.
A central checkpoint for APIs.
Exactly. Additionally, continuous logging and centralized log management are absolutely critical. You need visibility. Correlating events and gaining insight across these highly distributed, often stateless environments can be very difficult otherwise. Observability, understanding what's happening inside your system through logs, metrics, and traces, combined with automated policy enforcement, becomes paramount for security in these architectures.
API gateways, centralized logging, observability.
Got it. Beyond these specific areas like AI, IoT, and cloud, what other broader trends are shaping the future of Layer 7 defense that our listeners should maybe be aware of? What's on the horizon?
We're definitely seeing a powerful, accelerating push towards zero-trust architecture. The core idea is never trust, always verify. No trust is assumed based on network location or origin. Every single request, whether internal or external, must be authenticated and authorized. This often involves techniques like microsegmentation to isolate workloads and continuous authentication for every user and device interaction.
Zero trust. Assume everything is hostile until proven otherwise. Pretty much. Then there's advanced supply chain security, which is becoming absolutely paramount, especially after incidents like SolarWinds. This includes the widespread adoption of those software bill of materials, SBOMs we talked about, to track every component and dependency within an application. It also includes more automation in security testing, like automated penetration testing, integrated directly into the CI/CD pipeline to catch flaws earlier.
Okay. What about further out? Anything potentially game-changing?
Looking even further ahead, we absolutely must start seriously considering the potential threat of quantum computing to our current encryption standards. While practical large-scale quantum computers are still some way off, the transition to post-quantum cryptographic algorithms needs to begin now, as data encrypted today could potentially be decrypted later.
Quantum threats. Wow.
And we also need to think about securing the rapidly expanding attack surface of edge computing, where data processing and applications move closer to the user outside the traditional data center or cloud. This will require new approaches like distributed waves and enforcing security policies right at the very edge of the network. The landscape is constantly shifting, and Layer 7 is right at the heart of that evolution.
So after all that, what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've explored the application layer, Layer 7, as this vital, active interface where your digital life really happens. From the simple act of browsing a website or sending an email to complex file transfers and sophisticated cloud applications, this is where the action is. And as we've seen, it's where the most prevalent and often the most damaging attacks occur. It's truly at the heart of our online experience, the layer closest to us and therefore closest to the threats.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, securing Layer 7 isn't about buying one magic tool or applying one single patch. It's really a strategic, multi-layered discipline. It demands integrating security thinking right from the earliest stages of software development, that shift-left idea. It requires using specialized tools effectively, like web application firewalls. It means embracing strong authentication, like MFA, everywhere possible. And it absolutely necessitates maintaining constant vigilance through continuous monitoring, logging, and auditing.
It's a process, not a product.
Exactly. And as the case studies clearly showed, often the root cause of catastrophic breaches isn't just a clever technical flaw, but systemic organizational breakdowns, failures in process, in patching, in vendor management, in basic security hygiene. The human and process elements are just as critical as the technology itself, and often, honestly, much harder to get right consistently.
That's a crucial point. As we move rapidly into an era increasingly dominated by AI, by billions of interconnected IoT devices, by complex and dynamic cloud-native architectures, the attack surface at Layer 7 will only continue to expand and evolve in ways we probably can't even fully predict yet. This demands even greater vigilance, more innovation in defenses, and a deeper understanding from everyone involved. So the final, maybe provocative thought for you, our dedicated listener, is this. Knowing what you know now about the centrality and vulnerability of the application layer, how will you approach your own digital interactions differently? And perhaps more importantly, what steps will you take in your own sphere of influence to understand and advocate for a more secure online world? Especially knowing that the real battle for cybersecurity is increasingly fought right here,
Yeah.
at the very top of the stack, the layer closest to the user, closest to you.